Kindergarten teacher shares the sad truth about public schools indoctrinating 5-year-olds about transgenderism. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we're talking about a Pennsylvania elementary school that called the police on a 6-year-old girl with Down syndrome. Plus, a new challenge is daring kids to reenact a popular video game by running into traffic. And North Carolina says teenagers should have a basic understanding of personal finance before graduating high school. But we start with a call for help from a kindergarten teacher who describes the LGBT indoctrination she has been mandated to teach 5-year-olds in the classroom. Our first story today is an interesting one. There is a very popular radio talk show host in the greater Milwaukee area in Madison, Wisconsin, Vicki McKenna, and she routinely hears from teachers. She gets lots of complaints from teachers who tell her the story about what goes on in their schools. And this is an actual letter that Vicki received and she passed on to me. I've been on Vicki show a lot of time. And here's what the letter says. Dear Miss Vicki McKenna, I have been a Wisconsin kindergarten teacher for 31 years. I am a Christian and a conservative. I am a Bible believer. I really liked Scott Walker. Several years ago, we began a curriculum that was to promote tolerance and acceptance of supposedly all people, but in the end, its focus is the normalization of LGBTQ agendas. As a kindergarten teacher, I have been asked to redefine family and even been quietly shamed for not teaching new words describing non-binary family members. To be clear, I never want to be unkind or to make anyone feel unloved, but I never want to lie and, for example, use false pronouns by calling a boy a she or a he. 5-year-olds, we're telling you this idea that you've been told that this won't happen to 5-year-olds, that we're not going to do this in kindergarten. It's a 31-year veteran teacher who now is being shamed by his or her colleagues because the teacher is not immediately embracing this new concept and is now being told that in the classroom, this teacher is going to have to use these terminologies. And now Vicki continues with that letter that was submitted to her by this teacher. The last week of February is I Am Jazz Week. And on that Thursday, we are to read Jazz's book to the kindergartners and explain to the children about transgenderism. At this time, my heart is broken and I am at a complete loss. What do I do? Though I have had students in the past with gay parents, they would never have known how I felt about their situation. I cared for and about them deeply, but then I could teach and love without affirming their parents' lifestyle choices. The Bible is clear that we were created male and female, and we are not self-created. I must not be a part of lying to the children about this. Now, did you notice that this is the Jazz Week? We did a show last week on Milwaukee Public Schools embracing Black Lives Matter Week. Now you've got Jazz. Jazz is the young transgender that's made such a wealthy career for herself on TV. And writing books. How much time for 5-year-olds, kindergarten kids, is being dedicated to this kind of nonsense? And I completely sympathize with this teacher. I can tell you what the public schools would say. Well, if your Christian faith is in the way of progressive politics, maybe it's time you retire. This is where we are culturally right now. If you don't go along, your biblical faith is not enough to protect you. If you're not incorporating at 5 years old this radical policy in your kindergarten, the entire progressive teacher structure, the entire progressive American educational system will tell you that you do not belong in the public schools. If you put your faith before the welfare of LGBTQ 5-year-olds, time to hang it up. And I guess I want to encourage all teachers, like this teacher of 31 years, speak up and at least get it acknowledged out in the public so we can speak up on your behalf. Do something about it, because if we keep being silent, these weeks are already turning into months in the entire school year, and this is what they're doing. Yeah, and of course, the teacher, rightly so, does not want to be named, does not want the school to be named, but the fact that the teachers themselves cannot identify as that person, they cannot come out and tell directly what's happening because they know what's going to happen to their careers, means that maybe this is already too far down the rabbit hole. And speaking of kindergartners, the next story is about a mother who is in Pennsylvania, part of the Tridifferent Easttown School District, Maggie Gaines. She got a phone call saying that her 6-year-old daughter, who's in kindergarten, is now the mom had to file a police report because apparently the 6-year-old daughter made a threat at Valley Forge Elementary School. The threat is in the form of a gesture, and I'm going to do it now, in the shape of a gun,
to shoot, quote, shoot her teacher. Margot is the daughter, and she's in kindergarten, and she has Down syndrome.
Well, guns don't we know from past experience that guns don't kill people, Pop-Tarts do. So here you have another situation where a young child who's also severely developmentally challenged makes the finger gun. And because these schools and these so-called progressive teachers, the administrators, they're so woke that they're unable to judge who this kid is. That's the lesson here, Mom and Dad. That if you think your kids are individuals to these morons, if you think you're sending these kids to public schools and they're being treated like individual humans with individual worldviews and personalities perspective, you're wrong. You have a Down syndrome kid who happens to do this, right? And all critical thinking is out the window. All actually assessing the situation is out of the window. Your kid may as well be a 18-year-old with a machine gun to these people. This is how they treat your kids. So forget about the finger gun for a second. Stupidity prevailed. They called the cops. The cops, predictably said that this little girl is no threat. And the school stands by their decision to call the cops on a 6-year-old Down syndrome girl. That's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that it doesn't matter who your kids are. They're all treated this way. And so if you're happy with your kids being stripped of their humanity and their individuality in the name of no tolerance, intolerant programs, keep sending them to the public schools.
All right, let's take a look at what the mom had to say.
The girl at the center of it all, 6-year-old Margot. She has Down syndrome. Maggie Gaines says the moment that landed her daughter in hot water was when Margot made a gun gesture and said she'd shoot the teacher.
It was very clear from the beginning that she didn't understand what she was saying, and the teacher and the principal agreed, but then they said that they needed to convene a threat assessment team.
Gaines said the conclusion, there was in fact no threat to safety.
But they said that they still needed to call the police. And as I get this phone call, I was fine with everything up until they said, and we have to call the police. And I said, you absolutely do not have to call the police.
And my response coming out of that is, these are the same idiots in Black Lives Matter last week in Milwaukee. These are the same idiots who will tell you that the police are the enemy. In every other circumstance, we don't want armed cops in our schools because that's against black people, right? Black kids. We don't want police officers on campuses in high schools and middle schools to prevent shooters because that sends a bad message to minority students. We are anti-cops. We're teaching kids that cops are the problem, except when you're a Down syndrome 6-year-old and you do this, and suddenly the cops are a teacher's best friend. The hypocrisy knows no bounds.
Yeah, and the whole state of Pennsylvania last year actually passed a law that required all of these districts to form these threat assessment teams by 2021. So who needs cops when we have these threat assessment teams to intervene with the students?
Well, it's the recommendation of the threat assessment teams that they have no choice but to call the cops.
Exactly, yeah. Speaking of where we may need cops to intervene, we have this new challenge that is happening, but the Lytle School District in Texas is actually warning the parents about it, and they did so via a Facebook post. Basically, there is this app, or it's an arcade game, where it's called Crossy Road, and it's encouraging students or children to dart across traffic. Purposely dart across traffic to see if they'll make it. And it's being acted out in real life. I mean, we know we've had the Tide Pod Challenge and the Cinnamon Challenge and all these other stupid things. This one is now children. Dart yourself out in traffic to see what happens.
I think that we have decided that little kids are adults. The younger, the better. We are filling those kids with all sorts of adrenaline-laden educational opportunities. We're teaching them about sex, titillating them at young ages. We're teaching them, scaring them to death with global warming propaganda in the 1st and 2nd grade. We are exposing them to adult concepts and themes. Is it any wonder that young children now feel this need for an adrenaline rush? We have treated them like children. We have tried to talk to these kids like they're misunderstood. They're being held down by a system that doesn't recognize that at 16 or 15 they should be allowed to vote now. You're turning kids into adults, and then they're engaging in high-risk adult education imperatives, whether that's experimenting sexually or it's doing stupid stuff like this. And I know this goes back decades and decades. I remember that movie. Was it Stand By Me, where the little kid laid under the train while the train rolled? Was it?
That's such a sad
Was
movie.
that right? Okay. I mean, I get this. Some of this is just adolescent daredevilism, but I really do think that the degree to which you continue to treat little children as if they have the minds, the capacities, and the will, the willpower, the self-will of adults, you're going to get more of this stupid stuff. And again, the funny thing about this is the kind of dangerous behavior that if you transplanted it from this to something sexual would be defended 100%. Now it's the next eating of Tide Pods, apparently.
That it is, and hopefully the parents keep the laundry detergent away and pay attention to their children when they're crossing the street. But we're going to take a look at these children who will grow up to be adults one day and have to handle their finances. At least in North Carolina, hopefully starting next school year now, the high school students in North Carolina will be able to do their own personal finances because they must now take a finance course to graduate high school. It's a personal finance class, and it was approved by their state board of education, so it's going to be happening all across North Carolina, and it's going to replace one of their American history courses that they're currently taking to graduate. So currently, students in North Carolina, they have 4 social studies classes. They have world history, American history 1 and 2, and American history, founding principles, civics, and economics. So what's going to happen is they're changing that up, and now that it's going to be economics and personal finance.
Yeah, the only really sad, this is a great idea, of course, and the idea that you had to get it through the school systems, the idea that this was controversial in certain subjects. There's an idiot professor, a high school teacher, who's protesting this, not happy about this. But the sad thing is that you got to get rid of American history. It's always that has to go. Why not substitute some of this stupid sexuality education for this? Is it that hard to do? I mean, there's so many courses that the kids take that are of questionable value, other than political value. They're very questionable. Why do you have to keep pulling back on American history, right? Currently, you had to take, in North Carolina, world history, American history 1 and 2, and the founding principles, and now civics and economics, which is good. But as one of the administrators says, this is an easy thing for us because most states only recommend 1 year of American history. We had 2. So by cutting it, we're more in line. Yeah, that's what American kids need, is less of an understanding about their country. I'm glad. It's really important that they know what a mortgage is, and they know what compound interest is, and they know how high-risk credit cards are going to get them in debt. Maybe they'll even learn not to take out student loans if you can't afford them. But when you're giving them that economic that knowledge at the expense of a comprehensive understanding of the culture that gave them freedom, it's probably not going to work out that much in the end.
And that's going to do it for this Hump Day episode. If you liked the episode, please share it with all of your friends and family. We need more people to see The Dr. Duke Show. By sharing the episode, it's the fastest way for others to stay educated on what we're talking about every day.
If you're a fan with a business, consider letting us advertise for you. Visit freedomproject.com/advertise. That's freedomproject.com/advertise. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie, and we'll see you next time.